What is up, my friend? Welcome back to another episode of the Year of Plenty podcast, the show to help you get closer to your food source and learn the skills to make every year a year of plenty. Topics we discuss in the podcast revolve around wild food, homesteading, traditional food ways, nutrition, and so much more. And I'm pumped that you're here along for the ride today. Now, for today's episode, we're talking with Ryan Holm. Ryan is an outdoorsman who I met out here in Montana. He is also a dedicated marketing director with a solid 20-year career in media development within the hunting and outdoor markets. Actually, he was the marketing director at Mystery Ranch. And if you're a hunter, that should ring a bell. Mystery Ranch produces really high quality, durable hunting backpacks. And we talk about some of that in today's episode. But beyond that, Ryan is, of course, also a passionate hunter, outdoorsman. He's very into climbing, things like nutrition and biohacking, and then even photojournalism. So overall, a great guy to chat with on the podcast here. All right, that's it for the intro. Get ready for an interesting conversation with Ryan Holm. Hey, folks, I'm sitting here today with Ryan Holm. Ryan, how's it going?
Hey, how are you?
Good. It's a beautiful, it's not super sunny day today here in Bozeman, Montana, but we're finally having some sunnier days. And you're the first in-person podcast in a while, and I'm very pumped about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're in Bozeman, so right down the street.
Yeah. Neighbors.
Practically.
Yeah.
It only took me like 10 minutes to drive over here. So.
Yeah.
We are neighbors.
Longer.
Wow. That's great.
In Montana, that's a neighbor.
That is a neighbor, right? Yeah, we get a live listener, Finn from Germany. He, I'm sure he's been surprised by the distances here that you got to travel sometimes to get places. But yeah, Ryan, so you've been a lifelong outdoorsman, hunter too. You like to hunt a lot. And I know you've built a lot of skills around several outdoor activities like climbing and hunting and whatnot, which I think the listeners can definitely appreciate. A lot of listeners are already outdoorsmen or are aspiring outdoorsmen.
Yep.
So I'd love to just start out, with your story, kind of hear how you got into hunting and the outdoors in general.
Yeah, that's a long story. I don't know if we'll be able to cover it all, but originally, I got into hunting through a friend, and he was actually my climbing buddy. So It was serendipitous that way that he introduced me to it. And I've been a climber my entire life. I grew up climbing with a friend in Minnesota. My dad, he got us into the outdoors. We mostly went to the outdoors just to go walleye fishing.
Right. Great pastime up in Minnesota.
Yeah, great pastime. And so I spent a lot of time fishing, but I never grew up hunting. And so my dad, he went out with some friends when he was younger, had a bad experience. And so he just kind of passed on it. And then my grandfather, he did a little bit of duck hunting, did some deer hunting. I think my brother went with him one time. But other than that, I was never really exposed. I was pretty much just focused on sports. Like I was just playing a ton of sports in high school and college. And so never found hunting until moving out to Bozeman.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting because like I lived in Wisconsin and I know the deer hunting there. That really got me into it after, kind of learning more about it in Germany and hunting road deer there. But like the American style of hunting and kind of the culture around it, I got really involved with it in Wisconsin. And it's hard to think that you didn't get into it over there because of deer camp and all those,
It's very popular, like Minnesota, Iowa. I've actually wanted to consider going back there just to do a whitetail hunt in one of those spots. So, but yeah, I moved to Bozeman. I actually moved here after college in Chicago, moved out here, and then I was just a climbing and ski bum. I was working at a ski shop, and I would just wax skis, or I'd go skiing in the morning, come back, wax skis, go home, drink a beer, and then just like keep repeating that process.
The Bozeman dream.
The Bozeman dream. And then I went climbing a majority of my life when I first moved here. And Bozeman was a base camp. Bozeman has a ton of historical climbers like Conrad Anker or Alex Lowe. there's a ton of generational history here, like with Pat Callis. He's a good friend of mine, legendary guy that, no one will probably ever know. But
I know him.
Oh, you know him?
One of my best friends, it's his university advisor.
Yes.
Yeah.
So learning from those guys, learning about the climbing culture, learning how to respect, access to certain things and climbing areas in general. And then going to obviously climbing destinations across the U.S. and living out of your vehicle for, weeks or months at a time and just living a very simplified life. And that was kind of more of my introductory into like climbing and just environments and exposure and things of that nature.
Yeah. And when did, after that you moved into a lot more hunting and you worked for Mystery Ranch for a really long time. When did that kind of come about?
Yeah, I was actually working at Bob Ward's as a ski shop manager, and then I took a break from that and actually went up and did landscaping or excavation work in Big Sky because there's a big build there, and then I was like, enough of that for a year because picking up and digging with a shovel for 8 hours a day was not really a thing, and I was like, man, that's really hard work. So, and then I ended up moving back and working at the Bozeman Co-op for a few years. Yeah. And so I ran the bulk food section there for many years and kind of started to learn more about just like food and where your food came from. Because I really grew up more like Swedish Minnesota diet. It's like potatoes and meat and some sort of vegetable, that you ate, a couple pieces of, but it was really, really basic diet. Like eating fruit like strawberries was like blow your brains out.
Whoa. Oh, really?
That's hilarious. I was actually on a climbing trip and my friend was like, yeah, you want a strawberry? I was like, I've never had a strawberry.
Wow.
It just Minnesota just wasn't a thing, at least for me and my family. So working at the co-op, starting to learn about sustainability or locally sourced. So I started to like really understand it. I started to really appreciate like where my food came from. And then one of my good friends, Mark Seacat, he ended up coming into the co-op because he knew about me, and he said, "Hey, I'd love to have you come work at Mystery Ranch." And so I was like, okay. So he just offered me like the same amount of pay and good health insurance, and just started working the showroom at Mystery Ranch. And so that's kind of how I transferred into the more of the outdoor space beyond just being connected to retail.
Right. Huh. And then you were there for how long?
I was at Mystery Ranch for 13 years. I actually was there for a year and a half. I moved back to Minnesota because I didn't know if I wanted to necessarily live in Bozeman my whole life. And then I went back there and realized that it was not the type of life that I wanted to live. And I literally quit my job at like corporate level and then just like jumped back in my vehicle. I told my mom I was moving back and she's like, I knew you weren't going to last very long. And I just drove back to Bozeman and like reintegrated with the system. And then I ended up working for a company at the time was called Pacific Outdoor Equipment that migrated into a company called Highlight Equipment. We made sleeping mats and dry bags and a few other things. And then ultimately I moved back to Mystery Ranch, which is funny enough, same guy who hired me originally there, a part of it was Luke Buckingham. He ended up hiring me again back to Mystery Ranch. And so there's like definitely a lot of culture there at Mystery Ranch where sometimes if you leave, there's always like a spot for you to come back.
That's cool.
Nice.
And so like a lot of sewers on the production floor will leave because they have like seasonal jobs like firefighting, or they're in the military, or they have some other trade that they're into. And so it was really like a really good system that way. And so, then I spent 13 years there. We started out really small. I don't know. I was probably like one of the 17th employee there, but who knows what the count is. And we were, definitely like, smaller than a $1 million company. But by the time I left and sold the Yeti, that we were substantially bigger. So.
Yeah. That had to feel good, at least seeing that brand grow like that. And you did most of the marketing there, right?
Yeah. I mean, we literally didn't have a marketing team there at all. When I first started and I was redoing it, I was talking to Renee, who's the co-owner next to Dana. And I was like, what do you do for marketing? She's like, we don't do any marketing. We just make really good products and we just think that they'll sell that way. And I was like, So I started marketing, working on that with them. We built a small team. a good friend of mine, Tim Gates, who's still there and helping run the marketing team there now, at least on the creative side. And so, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's interesting to hear that you didn't. I thought you would have been hunting since you were a little boy, you know, or got into it that way. But
yeah, the thing for me is like, it's like I'm like very into whatever that thing is.
Right.
And so I usually go pretty deep down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Once something that I appreciate and enjoy, I'll go to probably more to the extreme, as my wife would say,
Right.
to learn that activity.
It's like a climber trait 101. You have to be obsessive.
You do. And in climbing, you have to be obsessive in a way where you don't want to die.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of transferable skills in that mindset where, you know, people talk about in the apex of the moment where you're drawing your bow back and you have an animal walking in front of you, that there's a certain amount of stress. I was able to take climbing from that aspect of your life is on the line, and being in that moment and only focusing on being in that moment. Because if you're not just focused on that moment, that could be between like getting hurt, severely injured.
Yep.
And so for me, when I was in that moment of drawing my bow back or putting my crosshairs on through a rifle, whatever that tool might be, that same stress was there, and I knew what that was. And so it wasn't any different, honestly.
Yeah.
It was actually, I was very comfortable.
Yeah, that's a cool way to think about it. My buddy Caleb has been trying to convince me to climb forever. He always tries to say, like, think about all the access you could have, all the places you could go to hunt that you could climb to. I'm like,
I don't know if I'd want to climb with my bow.
I don't know if that tells me, but that, what you just said, that makes a lot more sense. You're like, I mean, I see it in him. You really built that like mental fortitude and, you know, physical strength that definitely applies to the rest of outdoor pursuits, especially hunting. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's pretty funny. I think marketing companies or brands that market really well in hunting specifically, they always try to make this comparison between hunters being in extreme scenarios of like climbing up rock walls and rappelling into the areas. And it's like, you can see fake from very far distance away when you actually know what's happening there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting to watch and take note.
Yeah. There's no way I would be climbing up a bunch of that stuff with my bow or a rifle or anything.
You would never do that in a real scenario. That would never happen. I think the only scenario I feel like is maybe ibex.
Yeah. Or
where they naturally will hang out in those areas. But even then, I mean, you'd have to be super committed to that concept.
It's usually the guide going at the end and retrieving the animal. And
whatnot. Well, I had a friend that was approached it that way. I don't think they ended up really using the equipment though. You know, I think there's always this mindset that you're going to have to go retrieve, which could make sense in some scenarios, but I'd say it's a very small percentage.
Yeah, I would not want to do that. I climb a little bit, and it definitely teaches you to be a little mentally tougher outside, but it also teaches you when not to take risks outside. Like, if it looks pretty sketchy and you don't have the proper tools, it probably is too sketchy and you don't have the proper tools. So
yeah, you get okay with like making decisions on the mountain, and the mountain teaches you. And I think that was another transferable skill of being a climber. You're in the same environments, you're in the same scenarios. It's just that you have a different objective at the very end of the day.
Right.
And so you're 98% of the time you're spending time in the mountains in the element. And so taking all the background I had with ski mountaineering, with alpinism, with ice climbing, with mixed climbing, with bouldering, all that adventure stuff of going out and searching for things, like it's all the same mindset. And then hunting, you just have to change what the end result is and focusing on the kill, and understanding animal behavior and scent. And so it was kind of fun to kind of go from that aspect to kind of transferring into hunting.
Right. So what does being an outdoorsman or hunting mean to you now? You know,
I mean, it's everything. It's probably what keeps me going. Yeah, that's a big loaded question.
In terms of like for me, it might be a bit cliche, but like my main focus is just, bringing home the highest quality protein that I can. How I get there, like, I mean, I love doing all the backcountry hunting stuff because of the challenge and whatnot, but usually at the end of the day, I'll try to pick the easiest route to get there to make sure I have the freezer meat. And then, if I still have tags open, then I'm up for more challenges. But yeah, I guess it is a pretty loaded question.
But my response to that would probably be maybe less popular, but I really do appreciate the killing aspect of the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that is very ancient that you can't even explain.
Yeah.
It's like killing something or catching something like a fish. Like everyone has the same feeling. It's like this feeling of food. It's like your nervous system is just like ready for it.
That is so true.
Like the excitement, even like teaching. My wife has gotten really into fly fishing recently, and you can tell when she catches the fish, she like all this emotion just rushes into her, and she hasn't felt that before. And her mind gets kind of boggled, and it's like she really can't control like the aspect of like getting the fish and then bring it to the hand. And for her, the excitement in her mind is related to just catching and landing the fish. But in reality, the wires that are going off is a food wire.
Yep.
And so for me, like the idea of killing an elk or killing a deer or antelope or anything, like that feeling to me is why we do it. And then the food is like the secondary aspect of what we're fulfilling as far as the source.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely something, like you said, so like primal about it. It's wired into our brain that you can't really understand until you've done it. Like you can watch as many videos on YouTube as you want, but and then there's always a moment of, for me at least, a moment of, sadness that comes with it. But the initial reaction is just, it's not like, it's not even conscious almost. It's just like the subconscious happiness that, because, we're still the same humans we have been for the last 200,000 years, even longer than that. I mean, we've been eating meat forever. And I mean, I get the same rush with foraging. If I find a new foraging spot with a ton of plants, that I'm looking for in that year or that I haven't found yet, I get pumped.
It's like a kid in a candy shop.
Well, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation too, right? It's like, plants are alive. They have, there's been some studies that I've read recently about how they, have some level of consciousness, and like when things are getting burned or dying or getting pulled, like those plants are working together to help inform other plants within, the soil and communicating with each other. And so it's like, maybe there's an excitement there too. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a worthy conversation to have, probably for another podcast for somebody more talented than I am.
No, but I definitely appreciate you sharing it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we just talked a bit about the mental fortitude and also some of the physical fortitude that you need to do some of these outdoor activities. Not saying that, I don't want to turn anyone listening off who might not be in the best shape or in the best health, because you can enjoy the outdoors, especially hunting, fishing, without being the fittest ever. But for at least a lot of pursuits that we like to do here in the mountains and whatnot, it's definitely highly recommended to train, to be healthy, maybe have a good sense of what you're eating diet-wise, because that's the number one thing, I think, the fuel you put in your body. So I'm really curious about your health routine, like that you would like to follow, that helps you thrive in your outdoors and outdoor endeavors.
Yeah. As a climber, I always felt like I followed some routines from reading a few articles. There's a lot of like climbing for, training for climbing and things of that nature, but they don't ever really get into the nutritional aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And as a climber, I always felt like I was in really, really good shape. But it's interesting as you go through the process. I kind of found out that I wasn't in good shape.
Yep.
Because one of the the leading factors into climbing for getting strong is not being really that big, and it's almost suppressive in nature that you need to maintain a certain weight or even lose weight, and become this like wiry figure so that you can climb another grade. And it almost became destructive to my health as opposed to being healthier. And so it wasn't until I started having a few like health issues pop up where I was like, man, this doesn't seem correct. And so I started to kind of navigate down that road, and how do I fix some of these things that are going on? And is it true that, climbing is really good for you? And I started to question that, like, maybe climbing is really not good for your nervous system because it's constantly on edge. You're putting your system through, like, is it natural for the human body to be up on a 150-foot cliff, totally exposed?
Yeah.
And like, 30 feet above your last piece of gear.
Right.
Yeah. Oh.
and like going through a dicey section, and you're not sure if it's if what needs to be there is gonna be there for you.
And having that probably in your case multiple times a week, I assume.
Multiple times, over and over, trying again and again, projecting on something that feels way over your head. So in it, putting yourself in those scenarios, I was like, man, maybe your body's really not built to be exposed to that repetition, which showed up for me in different ways. So it kind of led me down this path of learning a little bit more about physical fitness, about nutrition, about stress, and what else should I be doing in order to improve that situation. So,
and which one of those do you think was the most important for you to kind of dial in?
And this was remind you, obviously the audience doesn't know me that well, but having kids in the middle of all this process too.
Yeah.
So now I have a 5 and 7 year old, but during that process and that beginning, that kind of like the discovery process of that, throw that in with having new kids and being a father and a parent, and then kind of learning all that at the same time. So
a lot of stress. Yeah.
So you're like a lot of stress, and then your job, and then everything else. But I was like, well, I just need to take like some baby steps. So just like meeting with a nutritionist. And then I also, for a long time, struggled with a ton of anxiety. And so I ended up going down a path of learning about that at a deep level. And we can talk about that more if you want to, but learning about a tool called neurofeedback. I'm not sure if you've ever
I haven't.
No.
any background on that. And so it's like all your brain is, billions of synapses like running at, levels that we can't even comprehend. But, you develop certain thought flows in your brain, and, why does somebody act a certain way? Like, why do they, in situations react in the same manner as they did before, even though it was exposed to them that they should do it this way. Yep. And so like a lot of behavioral based stuff, or why does somebody overthink a situation or somebody not, or underthink a situation? And so neurofeedback for the most part is, if you can think about like skiing, going to Bridger Bowl and skiing there, and maybe it doesn't snow for 2 weeks and you're just like skiing the same run. And now you've learned that run over and over again, all the bumps, all the turns, everything. Neurofeedback is like if it just dumped 40 inches on top of that. And now now you want to ski that same trail. Now you got to like find a new way
right
through that path to get down to the bottom of the hill in the same manner that you know really well. And so now you have to create a new neural pathway that is a new process that you're learning. And so I did neurofeedback for like 7 years straight for 2 times a week.
Wow. So you go with a therapist, or how?
Yeah, you have to do it's like a therapy thing, and then you got to do the neurofeedback, and it's like the most incredible thing. I've only shared that with close friends, but now I'm obviously on the podcast with like a lot more people. But I think it is something where there's all these like popular things for taking chemicals to like induce a certain state in your mind and go into different places, and I've always felt like that to be a little bit false.
Mm-hmm.
because it's so temporary.
Yep.
Right.
And people self-medicate with alcohol, or they do other things to help kind of take them into a different state. But the nice thing about neurofeedback was that it creates new pathways in your brain, and they'll do a brain map, and they'll show you exactly how your brain's working, how it's functioning. Because if you think about, like, if I take a hit of marijuana, that's like a delta wave that's like coming over your head.
Right.
And that's what's causing you to like have that fixation of relaxation.
Yeah.
Or that gamma, or whatever that is, whatever wave that is for you. But if you're really high in beta and you're constantly thinking about something over and over again, that creates anxiety.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So with neural feedback, you kind of learn to rewire those pathways, or even build total new pathways to.
Yeah, it's like a rebalancing of the brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you're actually making improvements. So then you get to see the improvement as you take snapshots of your brain over time.
That's cool.
That's really
And
cool.
so that to me is a solution, because I heavily believe that the world is electrical.
Mm-hmm.
And chemical is just like, I think is just, it does work in certain instances in Western medicine, but I think we are heavily electrical human beings of water connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I've not looked into that enough, but I know there's a lot of nature that, is really focused in the electricity and the magnetic fields and all that.
Yeah.
And I think, I do like grounding and stuff, and I think that is related to that.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a great point. Electricity, like even walking out barefoot in the grass, connecting your body back down to the earth. It's like the earth is a zero charge, so it like grounds your body.
Mm-hmm.
Some people say that could be pseudoscience or whatever like that, but yet to be determined. But yeah. So
I know a lot of people who swear by it. I think it's one of the reasons why those of us that love nature and love to do things outdoors keep coming back for it, because we probably have more grounding than we even, consciously think about while we're out there.
Well, what's the best nap you've ever taken in your entire life?
Yeah, it's always when you're
always in a hammock outside,
or even on the
hammock,
mountain.
or it's in the mountain.
Yeah,
and you woke up at 5 a.m. to go hike in the mountains, and that's 9 o'clock, and the animals aren't moving anymore.
Yep.
And you completely pass out on your pack, and you're just like sitting on the mountain on
in
the grass,
bear country without a worry.
without a worry, and you're just like, you go into another element.
Yeah,
there's a reason for that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's cool stuff. I'll have to look into the neural feedback, you call it?
Yeah,
right?
neurofeedback.
Some more.
But yeah, from like a nutritional which is probably more relatable to the audience, is something where it's just like, obviously what you're putting into your body, or if you're working through different fasting periods, obviously it's different for male or for female, and obviously female is way more complex.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But for a fasting schedule for a male, we can probably make it's a little bit easier, where you can kind of define times where you're going to eat and the cycles that you're going to eat on. Cyclical ketosis, essentially.
That's what you did.
So I did that for quite a while, and I think that works. That got me to a good point. It made me definitely appreciate food, and definitely helped me teach me about patience and about substance, because I was doing a program where I would only eat from like noon to 6, and then I'd be fasting for the rest of the time.
So a very short eating window.
Very short eating window.
Feeding window is
feeding window.
And then also on like a Tuesday, I would fast 36 hours straight.
Nice.
Because you were training your body, and then for fasting for 36 hours straight was actually not that hard.
Sounds terrible.
But if you're using like an MCT oil, like a medium chain triglyceride, it's actually quite a bit more sustainable. You almost don't even think about it.
Yeah. You still feel energized, maybe even more so.
You feel energized, and that's actually like when you go to work out, if you fast for 36 hours, and then at that noon time, I would go work out, like a really hard workout, like strength, like
CrossFit or
strength, just strength training.
Yeah.
And there's like they say it's like a 300% gain just off of that specific workout, because your body is like energized and ready to go.
Yeah.
And like I try to do some like heavier lifts on those days. So
yeah, that's interesting. I'd done keto for like 10 years,
Yeah.
Or I wasn't always in ketosis, but very low carb. I would say 50 to 100 grams of carbs a day. And I did the blood tests and stuff. I have the Keto Mojo, like to check my ketone levels and all that. And I would always love to, fasted workout was very rewarding.
Yeah.
Even though back then I came from the like bro sciencey, bodybuilding world, and everyone told me like if you do that you lose all your gains. I don't think I gained a lot of weight during that time, but I definitely didn't lose it, and I maintained it super well. I think a big part of that was just keeping my protein level really high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And from a lot of that stuff, like learning about nutrition, going to a nutritionist, like going through a lot of studies, like there's like the oat test that you can do. There's some other things that are bring you a lot of baseline metrics back that you can get feedback on and start to learn about. But then the other part of that was, as a climber, my training regimens were really specific to that activity. So it became a very wiry person, really thin. I think I was at like 168 was my weight at 6'5".
Oh, yeah, that's very thin.
You are tall.
Yeah. And so that was like, that's where I was at like several years ago. And so I got introduced to a program called Mountain Tough.
Yeah.
Through a friend. Obviously they're in Bozeman. So, and I was always like, you always make assumptions about things. And I was always like, oh, those guys at Mountain Tough, they don't know what they're talking about. And, they're just a bunch of meatheads. I want to lift a bunch of weight and go kill things. And like, that's a perception that most people have. I feel like, well, at least that's the perception that I had. But then when I got there, learned about the program, and then got invited to do a Backcountry 2.0 program there, I slowly learned that I had no leg strength whatsoever.
Yeah.
Even as I haven't been doing a lot of things in the mountains,
Yeah. Like I literally as a climber, you're just training your upper body.
Yeah.
Like
constantly.
There's funny stories about really famous climbers that would make their girlfriends carry their packs up the mountain so that they didn't build any more leg muscle.
I've definitely been a pack mule before.
See, example. It's like you don't want to build any more weight than you possibly can.
Yeah.
And so all that goes into the arms and the fingers and in the back. And so going through the program with Mountain Tough for this Backcountry 2.0 program, it was extremely humbling. And there was just like this light bulb that went off that was like, maybe I'm not as strong as I think I am.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so by going through the programming with Dustin and Sarah and Jimmy at Mountain Tough, they really kind of opened my eyes to like what I really need to be doing in order to go hunting. Because what I would do is I would find myself, as I was getting into hunting, I would just go on hikes just to go scout. And by the time I was going to return back to the truck, my legs just weren't there. Like I was extremely fatigued.
Cramping up.
And I was like only hiking with like 30 pounds.
Yeah.
With just like my sustainment gear for like going scouting for the day, just like kind of get in shape.
Right.
Yeah.
But like, I was like, well, dang, what if I had to actually haul out game?
Yeah.
In this same
with
scenario,
80 pounds on your back. Yeah.
And doing like multiple more trips, like there's just no way.
Mm-hmm.
So it started to change my perspective on it. And so I've kind of gone through that learning process like most people have with that. And so now I've been doing the Mountain Tough program, and I just like kind of set this goal. I was like, well, more weight probably produces more muscle. And so I started like really diving into the nutritional aspect of like gaining weight. So I had this like kind of a goal that I'm still on right now of gaining. I wanted to get to 245.
Oh, wow. Really?
From 165.
From 165. And I was like, what do I need to do in order to put on the muscle?
It's pretty big.
It's pretty big.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've been determined. I'm still on that path right now. And so over the course of those couple of years, I'm now at like 220. And so I'm like slowly there, but it's amazing how you probably put on the mass and the strength right away. But now that I'm at 220, it's going to be this like, I've been at 220 for a few months, and it's like now I'm realizing that it's going to be this incremental gain.
Yeah.
Probably over the course of like 10 years.
Plateau. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not going to come as fast as I was thinking.
Yeah. No, I last year kind of decided to cut back on weight a bit for the mountains, but just because I was really bulky. But before that, after doing the whole keto thing, I started to introduce more fruit again, and I hadn't done that forever. Besides like berries, the keto fruit that everyone knows, but just eating. I ate like elk grind for 3 to 4 months straight from a roadkill elk I got, and fruit. And that's all I ate, fruit and meat. And that was the most gains I'd made muscle, like while staying lean in a while. So that might be something to try.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely focus, like a lot of it's supplemental. I think you can kind of go through phases. But right now I'm just, I'm trying to I think I'm doing like 140 to 150 grams of protein per day.
Mm-hmm.
But I think protein is good, but I also think that organ meat is probably more important.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of interesting how, if you watch, any sort of show about, some animal killing another animal, it's amazing how the gut, or lack of a better term, go through the butthole to eat out everything in the gut. That's what they go for first. And then that the meat on the body is almost like secondary, like
sometimes left behind.
Yeah. And so that it's interesting. I pick up on things like that, and I started to realize, like, well, why aren't we eating more organ meat, or why am I not eating more organ meat? And so I started looking into it, and I found a supplement that they do a good job of supplying a vast array of organs. And so I started diving into just doing organ meat all the time. So organ meat combined with protein. Because obviously, even if you kill an animal and take that organ meat, it's probably not going to last for it.
Right. There are ways to extend it out a bit. Like, we love to eat organ meats, and I have a whole blog on the importance of organ meats on the website.
Of course you do.
We love put it, like, we haven't done it yet, but in the future, like, we love making liver sausage. We have done that a lot, like spreadable.
Big fan.
My stepdad has an insane recipe, and actually my coworker Shay, he gave me like part of a moose liver, which ended up being the biggest piece of liver I've ever seen. It wasn't even the full moose liver yet.
It's like a hind quarter.
Yeah, seriously.
We turned that into a liver, like German liver sausage, like farmer's liver sausage. So good. And then what I want to do going forward is to grind, like actually grinding the organs into grind. What I've definitely done before is for liver, I like it dehydrated, just like a bite, like a liver bite almost.
Liver chips?
Yeah, but not you don't dehydrate it to the point where it's super crunchy. You leave it almost like a chewy a bit.
The dog treats you get from Costco now. The liver
Which
treats.
Actually they're like pretty good ingredient wise.
Yeah.
Some of them. But when you eat that stuff, I swear I get an energy boost. Like it's I feel it. Might be, placebo, but I feel it. And I think organ meats in general, like you said, it's something that a lot of predatory animals eat first. And I've had one of my most listened to episodes is about traditional diets with Dr. Mary Ruddick. And she has studied traditional diets around the world, and organ meats is one of the 4 pillars you find in all traditional diets. Mm-hmm. We've kind of like totally forgot about it here in the Western world now. In Germany, they still do it a little bit in some countries, but it's not how it used to be.
Yeah, I probably have more to learn from you guys on that.
Yeah.
Organ meat and foraging.
So. Yeah. We'll get you into it. Sweet. So, Lindy, I know you had a question.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the gear and kind of what trends you've been seeing in the last couple years, and what trends do you think are going to stay? What trends are going to go?
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. I've been in the outdoor industry for, let's just say, since I was 16, and I was always interested in it. How the system worked, how the industry worked. I worked in retail since I was 16. I think it was called Dick's Sporting Goods, or maybe it was another one.
Dick's Sporting Goods? That's big in Wisconsin, at least.
Yeah, so. Big in Wisconsin. I was affiliated with like REI in some respects, and then some smaller mom and pop shops. But nonetheless, outdoor industry was a big part of that. So, but yeah, gear is always an interesting aspect from the outdoor industry to the hunting industry. And a little bit of story about that is going down to Outdoor Retailer, which used to be kind of a stalwart, so to speak, that it was the show that you would go to, and every brand that was a brand in the U.S. would show up there. It has obviously it has faded since the pandemic, but it was always intriguing to see all the hunting brands, the owners or the designers walking that show, because the outdoor industry is like literally 20 years in front of the hunting industry. And so they're all there taking notes like on their trims and what they're using and how are things being designed and where is the industry going. And then if you go to ISPO in Germany, it's even further along. Like the European market is much further than even the US outdoor industry. And so
that's interesting.
You can almost go into the future, which we would do. We would go into the future at ISPO and learn about that. And then you could recognize a trend, and that trend then would show up maybe, let's just say 5 or 6 years in the US later.
Right.
So you're always going to that show to kind of learn about where the industry from a global perspective, where it's going.
That's interesting, because being from Germany, it always feels like things happen in the US first and then they come to Europe, and even now with like the hunting industry over there, I think it's going very camo heavy. Like they never had that. It's always been, at least in Germany, traditional wool clothing, leather, if it was technical, it was like very plain colors. Now it's like camo is like the new thing over there.
Yeah, it's interesting. And the nice thing that at Mystery Ranch is that we were in so many different industries, like in the military and special forces groups. You could actually say the same thing for U.S. SOCOM and special forces groups influencing European-based militaries. So anything you could basically say, like, well, if you're making it for this special forces group, we just want that. They would just point to that pack and they'd be like, we want that, because they know who's using it.
Yeah.
And so you had that. So we had that same influence on the military going overseas.
Interesting.
But yeah, just following trends, following gear. And I know I'm speaking kind of more high level at the moment, but if we talk about ultralight,
yeah.
Ultralight, I remember if there's a few brands, like ProLight Gear was actually in Bozeman for a while, and they were like a store that was literally just dedicated to ultralight gear. There was Backpacking Light, which was a blog that was ran in Bozeman too, but actually was more nationally based as well. But there's all these companies that were kind of betting in making the lightest possible gear you could imagine. Like you're going in, people are weighing their packs on scales or weighing their whole setup on scales, and like go in as light as possible and go fast. And then the topic, we were watching that as Mystery Ranch, but we always believed that we wanted to produce the most durable gear that exists. Mm-hmm. And so we never like trim corners or like removed weight because we were trying to meet a certain weight objective. We were trying to build to standards that worked for Mystery Ranch, but not for the industry.
Right.
And that came from Dana building packs for so long at Dana Designs. He was always building the most durable pack, and people caught on to that. And the way Mystery Ranch came around is that the industry knew that was his thing, building durable things that would not break. Mm-hmm. And so the Special Forces, the Navy SEALs, came to him and asked him to build him a specific pack for a certain type of mission. And they wanted him to submit that pack to the procurement process so that they could use the pack that they wanted to use, not the pack that they were issued.
Oh, that's sweet.
That's good. Yeah.
And so it became this thing of like, okay, Dana's all about durability. It may weigh more, but it's not going to break. Mm-hmm. There's this methodology and this mindset behind when you go into the backcountry, any pack is going to work. You can go buy a Kilty backpack. You can go buy a North Face backpack. You can go buy a Gregory backpack. You can go buy any of those backpacks. They will work 95% of the time. But when everything goes wrong which we know happens in the backcountry, when we know that could happen, or when you're carrying way too much load because you need to get out of there because, it might be grizzly bear country. You just have to move a lot of weight and just shuttle things out. Things can break.
Yeah.
And when things break on a backpack, it turns the whole situation into something that you were not hoping for.
Yeah, it's game over.
It's game over. And so we made stuff for the bad day is what we always thought about for Mystery Ranch. Like, what is the worst possible scenario you could think of? And in the military, it happens consistently.
Right.
You're getting into situations where you might have to haul a person in your backpack to save his life.
Mm-hmm.
There's countless scenarios of that and stories that we've talked to people about. And so when we talk about gear and talking about that, like that really fed into my behavior as a consumer to always look for things that will never break.
Right.
And so that has become my motto. So if I see something that's chintzy and has a trend or a marketing ad behind it, has a certain statement that like resonates with a consumer group that might be manipulated by advertising, but they don't know it. And I have a strong background in marketing, so I know how manipulation works. We won't go into that, but
people don't need to know that.
People don't need to know that. But I think that we have to choose durable goods. And then so this bigger topic came into play of sustainability.
Right. Because they go hand in hand.
They go hand in hand. And so people started talking about sustainability and like started to like persuade the industry that sustainability was the number one thing that you needed to be talking about. And I actually was on the OIA group for the outdoor industry, which is a bigger group that just talks about sustainability. Like REI is there, Patagonia is there, bigger brands are there talking about sustainability. And, we're taking all these surveys and filling all these things for the group. And really the thing that we could stand on was durability. And everyone else is talking about supply chain and putting these things together and making things work and more efficient and how do we reduce waste? And Mystery Ranch is just over here raising their hand and they're just saying durability.
Yeah.
And no one else is talking about it. And so that's been that had been their motto forever. And so it's interesting to watch the trend kind of go full circle of like, how do you go as light as possible into the mountains as you can? And then how the industry is coming back to like, well, how can you go into the woods with the most durable gear that lasts for a longer period of time?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've gotten to watch that full cycle and watch it happen. And that's why you had brands like Yeti do so well, is because now they're making a cooler that was very durable. It could be chucked around in your truck. It could be thrown outside. It could be left. You could throw dead meat in it and haul it across the country and still be cold. Like they're basically creating more of a culture around durability, and people were catching on to that. Like, oh, durability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was interesting to kind of watch that.
I mean, it really goes super full circle because I think a lot of the natural materials, are the ones that are the most durable in the long run. At least, I mean, I have wool clothing, the older wool clothing that's many years old. I've had several ultralight pants that just ripped on me within a year,
Right.
Because they're stretchy material and all that. Though honestly, the ones that have held out the longest for me are the pants you're wearing here right now, the Fjällräven. I've had my Fjällräven pants for 8 years and I wear them every year.
Right.
And I think I had to fix them once. Yeah.
Well, and speaking of fixing, Dana is such a good designer, and the Mystery Ranch has obviously taken what he had built and then scaled it. But he originally started out in repair.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how he would repair things. And so he learned like the repair process. And so then he took the repair mentality into pack design. So then now you take that methodology and then how repairable is the thing that you designed.
Right.
That's the way to do it.
Which is not like most people. Like they're just building it to make it look cool. Like hard lines and sharp corners and make things look like poppy and like make it look like showroom worthy. But from like a design perspective, that's not even the same thing. So if you can make a pack that's fully repairable and get it back in the field, like Fjallraven has done, like making a pant with panels so that you could maybe just replace the entire panel.
Yep.
It becomes a way more durable, sustainable product that you can keep. I even sent a pair of Fjallraven pants back for the gusset that got ripped out. I was just sitting on a rock and tore the pants, but I guarantee they're just going to take that panel out and put a new panel in.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
That's the way to do it. I repaired some backpacks and things for a company here in Bozeman for a little while, and there were so many parts of their bags that could not be replaced, so they were junked, and it's just so unfortunate. It's like a $200 backpack.
Right.
That's now free to the dumpster.
Yeah. Like you're like, all the Fireland crew, the packs we designed for all the firefighters, like they'll send, we obviously have them flag all their stuff and clean out the packs, but they'll send packs that don't even look like packs back to us. And then we could repair the entire backpack for the most part. If something wasn't usable, obviously like a yoke was like completely burned because it got set down on ash, like obviously it's melted to the point of no repair.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we could fix a higher percentage of those packs and get them back onto the field. And we'd guarantee the life of those fire packs for about 3 years because they are the heaviest users of anything. But we pride ourselves on being able to fix those things and get them back in the field.
That's awesome. So it sounds like gear trend-wise for you, durability is like the anchor. Like that's the most important. That's what's going to stick around. And with that also comes sustainability.
Yeah.
And not just sustainability in terms of like the end user and how they're using it and how long they're using it, but within the whole supply chain and how the things are built.
Yeah, because I think I think if you look at the global market a little bit broader perspective, people really want to know where their stuff comes from, how it's made, and I think that durability is a big part of that, and so they'll consider that as a buying factor. Yeah, so it'll definitely, and durability. If we talked about fitness a little bit, how durable is your body?
Yeah,
like there's that saying like eat your food like it's medicine, otherwise you'll be eating your medicine like it's food.
Oh yeah.
And so in we get to these ages where I'm 42, and so you're starting to think about like, well, how much longer can I do this?
Right.
Like how much longer can I be a hunter before now my kids are hunting for me?
Yeah.
Which hopefully that will overlap more and more by being able to focus that on as I'm at 42, as opposed to like picking it up when I'm 55 and like completely out of shape. And now I'm like on this recovery projection that puts me in a place where I don't want to be. So hopefully when I arrive at those years, I would put my time in now to be able to extend that.
Yeah. It's like you got to, with all that, I think fitness and dieting, or just, I don't really like the term dieting, but eating, in a way that really fuels you, you got to start it now. Like don't push it off.
Yeah.
Especially because like you just said, when you're getting older, it's just so much harder to make up for those bad years than if you're like constantly on it and have made it a part of your routine and focus on it.
Yeah. Cause fitness doesn't, I think there's a misconception too, and this, this comes down to marketing too, that, they sell these like 3-month programs and you'll get back into it, or, eat this type of food and then like all of a sudden this magic will work for you. And it's like, it's as you get older, you realize that those things are just not true, and that your mindset has to be set on more longer term. Like if you want to reach your goals, you're probably at least around 10 years to really make a difference in what you're trying to pursue. And so anything less than 10 years is like, it's for me, it's just like, I just put that on my brain. Like, yeah, that's a good idea, but I'm going to keep that over there. Cause I know that that's probably not realistic and that's not true. And so, cause you get fed all this information and you're like, well, is that me? And you're like, no, maybe they're just trying to tell me that that's me. And so I try to keeping those kind of influences outside, realizing that long-term durability, nutrition, whether it's mental health, whether it's food, all those things are important to maintain a more durable life.
Yeah. I like how you think long-term like that.
Yep.
You don't often meet people who do that. Most people these days are just about the like
here and now
to instant gratification, you know. Or even it sounds like even when you start something new, you're thinking, you know, okay, it's probably going to take me, let's say 10 years to really master this. Sounds like you're very obsessive about things in a good way. That's what that's what we do. Yeah, and then you might not even start it, but you did mention to me that you started long-range compound archery now, compound bow archery. Have you been shooting compound bow for a while, or is that a new thing?
Yeah, I've been doing two things, which I started out in compound. I went into really deep into traditional bow hunting, like longbow hunting.
So you did that already.
And so I did that for about 3 or 4 seasons. I can't remember how long. When you have kids, you like forget things and how time exists. But I recently gotten back into compound shooting, and I've had a friend who helped me kind of get me further down the path quicker. And then also long range rifle shooting. Yeah. And so kind of getting back into the practice of both those things. Because I think
you're not starting at ground zero. You're building. You're already on that 10-year trajectory there.
Yeah, I felt. Well, yeah, I feel like I have started completely over in some sense, because it's amazing how somebody who is really good at something can show you how incorrectly you're doing something.
Right.
I get that. I thought I could shoot a bow before I met Poldy, and then turns out I did not. Good, but, yeah. I was shooting like different grained arrows, and it was a whole thing.
Yeah, you're on another level there.
Yeah.
But I would say that, yeah, like going into the process of like choosing your chassis, I'll just call it chassis because for a bow, but I know it's like a frame or something like that. But choosing your frame, choosing what type of sight you use, positioning your peep in the right spot, what type of strings, what type of what your draw length is, and fine tuning that, how you're setting your balance on your feet. Actually, shooting a traditional bow really teaches you about tension, because there's so much let off on a compound bow that you don't really focus as much on the tension part on a compound bow, because you have so much let off.
Right.
But then you actually realize that it's still important on a compound bow to maintain the tension just as much as if you were on a long bow. But it's a slightly different mechanism, but it's relatively the same.
Well, and you're holding much longer with a compound bow, right? And that's really where the tension has to come from.
Depending on the scenario, because you're, like with a longbow, you could still pull it back and hold it for a relatively long time if you have the right mechanics in place, because you basically create this frame to hold everything in place. Sometimes the shot's quicker because it's at a quicker distance. It's more like a 8 to 15 yard shot as opposed to 30 or 45, where you might be looking through some branches or trying to find the view, get your bubble set, find your pin, find your breath, and then actually focus in on the last part of the shot. So there's definitely different aspects of that. So, and then getting into long range shooting, and long range shooting in an aspect where it's a training mechanism for shooting at shorter distances. So, using my hunting rifle to get that dialed in, to learn how to shoot wind, how to find a target, how to re-find a target, putting yourself under stress, doing like a shooting competition teaches you how to move through your mechanics quicker. And it's kind of like shooting an animal, like there's some stressors to get it done quickly. So learning to do some of those things. So I'm just literally on the process of starting that, which has been fun.
That sounds really helpful. And I really want to start doing that too, because I am often the guy who just, with a rifle goes out and shoots to 100, 200 yards off the bench without that extra added pressure that some of that long range stuff brings with it, and with a bow too. What's for a bow, what's kind of the max distance you would shoot at an animal right now?
I think both bow and rifle, it all comes down to the scenario.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
And wind affects things more than people realize.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I see more people, I mean, like, a typical hunter that might only shoot their rifle or bow just before season. And then it goes, when the season's over, it goes back into the area that they store it and sits there until it comes back again.
That's most. We're not quite there, I would say.
Yeah.
We definitely like start 3 months earlier or so, before.
And that was me too. So just to be clear, I felt that maybe I wasn't giving as much focus to it and appreciation that I should have been. So I just started diving a little bit deeper with friends and understand like more of the cadence and the process of that. So I started to really appreciate what it took to actually be not just a good shooter, but a great shooter.
Yeah.
Right.
And now obviously we're in grizzly bear country. So either carrying bear spray in one hand or a pistol in the other, depending on the scenario, being a good pistol shooter is also important. A lot of people own a pistol, but they have never really shot under stress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's number one for us right now is improving the pistol skills.
We're pretty good, but we're not great.
It's like for bow, I usually limit myself at 30 yards. Usually that's kind of what my limit is, 30, 40. I feel comfortable like doing that, even with starting 3 months ahead of the season, practicing. Rifle, the longest I've shot is 320, and
Oh, you did a 600-yard shot this last year.
No.
Yeah, you did on my 270.
You
hit a dinner plate. Oh,
at an animal.
At an animal.
At an animal, yeah.
I was like, hang on.
Yeah, I've definitely taken on the range some shots, but yeah, well, I forgot my point now, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. Where was I going with that?
But I think we're from like a long range perspective, like you're training out past a range that you normally would take as a hunting shot.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's justifications for taking a longer shot when the scenarios are right.
Yeah.
And I feel like, if you're on the side of a hill, it's pretty wide open. You've got a good field of view. The wind is only throwing you less than 1 MOA left or right. And you've got the holdover right, or you're changing your turret to the right click, and you've got a good foundation that you're shooting from. Then there's just scenarios that are more available to taking a longer shot.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Right.
But in the haste of the moment, which I feel like most hunting shots can be, ideally I'm looking for a range between 150 yards to 350.
Mm-hmm.
And if you only hunt with a rifle, you don't ever truly understand how getting closer is actually available to you.
Yeah.
Right.
And that you think that you have to take that 400-yard shot.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, actually you can walk another 200 yards and make it a 200-yard shot.
That's a super good point.
Depending on the scenario that you have.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I had an opportunity to shoot an elk last year at a further distance, but from a bow hunting perspective, I could see the terrain. I was watching where they were going to set up and bed down. And so I by looking at the mountain and looking at the aspect, I knew that I could get to this point and get a closer shot that I felt would be more lethal in this scenario.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's interesting how the short range shooting there is also transferable to the long range, shooting just skill wise, at least bow to a rifle, and then also like long range to short range though, again, because what you were saying, kind of like practicing long ranges will prep you at getting better even at those shorter distance shots. And there's definitely, it goes both ways.
Yeah. And even shooting with a suppressor, like where your follow-up shot, like it's interesting, like shooting without a suppressor or even just with a break, like the animals skirt a lot harder on that first shot. And I've noticed on a suppressor, they almost don't even know where it's coming from.
Mm.
And so your follow-up shot could be more achievable because they might not run as far because of the bang noise that they just got from you.
That's a benefit of suppressors that I haven't heard of yet, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Because most people, I think, choose or kind of argue for suppressors because of their ears, less sound.
I don't think it's for the ears. Like, I feel like it's more just like the sound that travels. So like I shot an elk, actually we got on film, shot an elk, and the elk just stood around like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I did a second follow-up shot, and then the elk was down. And so it's like, yeah, it makes it for a better scenario overall for the animal and for you.
Right. Less stress for the animal. Yeah. That's cool. Maybe you got to get one.
And then the elk just like walked off like 150 yards and just kept feeding.
Yeah.
Because they're just like, they didn't even know that it took
the
place.
Rest of the herd.
Yeah. They just took that. And then we just waited for, 20 minutes and then just like walked up and
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, something to think about. Neither of us have a suppressor. But yeah, pistol shooting, that is number one for us right now just because of bear safety. And that is, Finn here, our buddy from Germany, he's shot his first rifle and pistol and shot the first time shooting guns here. And he was also surprised at how difficult it is to shoot a pistol,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very difficult.
As easy as people think.
Yeah, so I'll join you, and I think I'm working on a concept with a pistol thing right now. So I'll share that later.
Yeah,
not live, but yeah,
please do. That would be great. So, long range rifle archery. Though, are there any tips you've learned recently that helped you improve? Something that really stands out?
Yeah, I think going to. Have you ever been to Total Archery Challenge?
Yeah, no, I haven't.
She's coming with.
You have to. I think it's like it's one of the. It's a great event. It's great culture. It's great people. It's they have seminars there. It's like a very community based program. And you can ride up on the chairlift, and then they have like sometimes 3 to 4 different courses. We used to sponsor at Mystery Ranch, the locals course when we were in Big Sky. And it's like every shot is under 40 yards, but it's a pretty manageable expectation for the shot. So it puts you in different scenarios, but the thing is that you never really shoot at angles.
Okay.
So it's your third axis that you never really dial in on a bow. And what it teaches you is that you actually have to shoot at an angle. So if the target's up higher, you can't literally just bring your bow up like this and tilt it, because then you just changed the pitch and then how everything's following up with your eye,
just raising
how everything's aligning.
Yeah.
So you might actually, if you just don't shift at your hip, you'll shoot low.
Right.
Because you haven't made those proper adjustments. So as you learn to shoot at an angle, you might draw back like right into the mountain, but then tilt at your hip, and now everything's still aligned.
Yeah.
Right.
So sure, learning to shoot that third axis is a big component. And I think it's like something that a lot of people don't consider. It's like they're out in the mountains and they're out east or Midwest on flat land, and they're constantly shooting at their target. It's like a perfect 0 degree. Then that's not a transferable thing when you go into the mountains and you start shooting things at angles.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think, another thing that a lot of archery hunters overlook, because you're like, it's easy to just stand 30 yards from your target and rep out a bunch of shots day after day, but really putting yourself into real life scenarios with angles, with maybe like
uneven ground,
some fitness beforehand, so you're shaky and whatnot. That's the real way to practice.
Yeah, or even just like wind.
Wind.
But yeah, there's a ton of good programming out there. Like there's a guy, Joel Turner, that has a program called Shot IQ, and he teaches you about stress. And I actually had a mentor of mine. His name is Tom Klum. He's down in Colorado, and he taught people how to shoot traditional bows at the Olympic level. And so I got to learn from him. And then he actually came on a hunt with me in Montana, and we went elk hunting. And then one day it was like raining pretty heavily, almost to the point where it's not even worth going out hunting. So we just spent the time under a tarp and shooting at a target for like 8 hours one day.
Oh my God.
He just walked me through every single mechanical situation of shooting a traditional bow. And so that was like an experience I'll never forget.
You're like forced to learn for 8 hours.
Yeah, it's like, and this old man's just like teaching me how to like do all this stuff. It's funny, I call him old man, but he's still very fit for being his age. And so, there's a ton of stuff. There's a ton of material out there, but yeah, I definitely encourage you to go out and find different scenarios that are not common, like in your backyard.
Right. Yeah. No, those are great tips. So I want to pivot a little bit into your new work. You recently started working with Land Trust, which might, I think out here people know what it is, but I think kind of like I have a lot of listeners in the Midwest and whatnot, and even down south, and I don't know how far spread you guys are at this point, but I'd love to just kind of like chat about the company a bit and the why, really, what the why behind Land Trust and the how. And I think it's an awesome concept. I think it'll definitely help facilitate more land access, especially for those people seeking to procure more wild food, through hunting and talking to some other people there. I know there might even be some foraging opportunities in the future with landowners and whatnot. So yeah, I'll give you kind of the floor a bit to explain kind of what or the why behind Land Trust and what it's all about.
Yeah, I've been there for about 5 months, and it's a whole nother market that I don't know anything about. And so it's been like, so now that you've obviously learned a little bit about my mindset, when I latch onto something, I usually go pretty deep.
Yeah. I love that.
And to learn about farming and ranching. And I think it's like it caught me off guard because I thought I knew a little bit about it, and it helped me realize that I don't know really anything. Mm-hmm. And as a hunter, in our current environment, we always think about public land versus private. And public land is a really good thing because it gives access to these places that other countries don't have the same type of access to. Yeah, and it's like a beautiful Germany, thing. We don't like have. Even as a climber, I didn't actually even know as a climber that public lands were even a thing. Like no one ever taught me that. Like I did growing up climbing in Minnesota. We go climb in Wisconsin. We go climb in a place called Red Wing. But we go climbing there, but I never had like this concept like, oh, this place could be taken away from me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or access could not be provided anymore because of something. Mm-hmm. Like it just was never taught to me. My parents didn't know about it. I was never a part of any group that talked about public lands. And so learning about public lands through Mystery Ranch and the people that got me into hunting there, it started to open my eyes. I was like, wow, I didn't know this was a resource that was just available to you and could be provided to you or taken away.
Right.
Yep.
And so I had that kind of same epiphany going and working for Land Trust with private land, that there could be a misconception of the relationship between a hunter and private land. Mm-hmm. And I've always known about outfitting through, not always, but I learned about, the outfitting process through Mystery Ranch, through outfitters that we worked with. And so just learning about the outfitting process and the leasing process, and how it is like it's not just a lifestyle, but it's actually a way to make a living. Mm-hmm. And then learning about landowners and farmers, there might be a misconception that since somebody is a landowner, that they are also cash rich. And that's just not the case.
Right.
And
definitely
so
not.
they may have inherited that land and the property tax that goes with it.
Yep. And the debt.
And the debt and all the things that go with it to if one bad storm or some sort of disaster happens, how that can put them in a position that's almost unrecoverable.
Yep.
And so it's just it is a different world. And I'm almost talking about this not even from a hunting aspect, but just understanding like where the landowner and farmer are coming from. And so I got this really cool opportunity from Land Trust to say, hey, we want you to go and talk with some of these landowners. And they wanted me to kind of do a campaign about spring turkey hunting. Mm. And so the focus, actually, the original request was more about, we need to create a campaign about spring turkey hunting. But I was more about, and then as I kind of went through the process of talking to the landowners, I learned that this was more about landowners more than it was about turkey hunting.
Mm-hmm.
Turkey hunting was like, they're like, oh yeah, those the yard birds that just run around. But it was interesting to start learning from them that that they really do appreciate their land. They appreciate the conservation aspect of it, but they don't always appreciate the approach from a hunting aspect.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty universal, and it probably depends on the region, right? Because some people that don't appreciate the approach here might not necessarily mind it in different places, like the Southeast, where private land is really well known.
Right.
The process of it is really understood. Out west, it's probably maybe a little bit less understood by the Western hunter than it is by the Southeast hunter, because it's a thing. But going through that process of interviewing them and understanding what their position was on it, they really do appreciate the hunting aspect of it. They're very conscious of and aware of what animals are on their property. They understand how they migrate, when they're there, when they're not, because either, during season or out of season, they're fixing fence or working on some sort of habitat improvement project to make sure that the land is there and sustainable, not just for their cattle, but for the wildlife that feed on it. And so it was really interesting to hear from a few of them that, the whole concept of door knocking, and how, from my aspect as a hunter, I would go to a property and door knock, or through block management access their land. And you always think about it as your single instance that you just went there and had with that landowner.
Right.
But then think about it, if that happened like 40 times a day.
Yeah.
Yep.
Imagine you sitting at your desk and your boss comes over to you 40 times a day and interrupts your day.
Yeah.
To ask you a question. How much work are you going to get done?
Yeah.
And so it's almost like an annoyance. Not every landowner is like that. Some of them do appreciate it because it breaks up their day in conversation.
Yep.
But some prefer that they don't have the resources, and they don't even know how to manage or even say yes or no, depending on who that person is.
Yep.
Right.
And so it becomes like a resource, a recreational income resource. And so you talk about, there are so many different conventions talking about recreational income. And so hunters may not recognize, maybe they do, that there is a whole industry behind this of like, how do you generate income off of your land?
Right.
And as hunters, it's not our job to tell them how they're going to make money.
Yeah, that's probably not going to be your best option to get on that land.
Right. And the interactions that you have with that landowner change over time, and their mood might change, the season might change. It might be more dry or more moisture than they need that year. And so the situation changes for them all the time. So as a hunter, you have to almost be aware of that, as opposed to, well, what's in it for me?
Yeah. Because
right now, as a hunter, you go there and you expect that you're going to get this exchange for this animal that you get to hunt, and they say yes, and then you kill the animal, and that you've created a relationship with this landowner because you've gone there and you've had good conversations with them. But then you realize that, well, wow, there was no like equal exchange of value there.
Yeah.
Maybe you gave the landowner some of the meat, but maybe the landowner doesn't need the meat.
Yeah.
Because they have tons of cattle and they take maybe a cow off the field for their resource every year. So they don't necessarily need meat. So it's like, oh, I buy them alcohol. Or it's like, well, look in their closet. They probably got like 60 bottles of whiskey that they'll never drink. So what is it? But I think we have to kind of rethink about what our interaction is with that landowner. And that's where kind of land trust comes in.
Yeah. So basically on a high level, hunters, as of right now, hunters only can use land trust to find access on private land to go hunt, and there's a monetary exchange instead of bartering or something like that on that end.
Yeah, and like a lot of states have like a block management program where they can pay for every block management hunter that goes on somebody's property in Montana, that could be like $7 a hunter a day.
Yep.
Right.
And so that concept is kind of maybe a little bit too old, and where, like that means like that landowner that has in the block management program might be trying to get as many hunters on the property as they possibly can, not really thinking about the wildlife, just to maximize profit.
Right.
And so it becomes like a not conservation model.
Right.
But land trust is not trying to take away from block management. It's more of like an opportunity for program to, educate people on the opportunity that's there. It's giving actually more power to the landowner, because in leasing, if you lease your property, you're leasing ownership to that land.
Mm-hmm.
So you no longer get to dictate what's going to happen.
Right.
Right.
From a land trust perspective, you own the property, you own the pricing that you charge for a certain package. You never hand over ownership to land trust. It's fully yours.
Right.
You get to book it. You get to set the pricing the way you want it to be, and then you get to control the scheduling. So you can say like, well, these weeks out of the year, I'm going to hunt myself, or my family's coming into town, or we're out on vacation and we're not here. So you get to as a landowner, you get to dictate the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then we just provide the service for the transactional part of it.
It's almost like Airbnb.
It's
but
exactly
for land,
it's exactly Airbnb for private land.
Is there some sort of a grading system for the hunters that go on the land where, they left 15 boxes of beer out in the middle of the field, or whatever it is, that they left junk?
There are reviews.
Yeah. Okay.
So you will have reviews on your profile. Landowners will know what type of experience they had with that person, that individual.
Good. Okay.
So it definitely controls the process there. So
and
you can also review the landowner. So you could review the experience that you had there too. So it's kind of a two-way street. So it's kind of keeping some accountability to this.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, because some people go in and just wreak havoc and drive their side-by-sides all over everything if there's no one watching them do it,
Right.
There's no respect for some people, and some people are fantastic, but it takes one to ruin it for everybody.
Yeah, and that's what's nice about the land trust program is it working through us or working with the landowners, they have like a certain level of expectation now that they're working with a customer that is paying for an experience. And so that person's probably going to respect this experience, as opposed to somebody like, one of the guys I interviewed, he's like, you don't understand how many times a day during the fall season, like somebody comes driving up the dirt road and they see a deer jump over the fence and they pull up into my driveway and they're just like, hey, I just saw a deer run across your property. Do you mind if I run out and just shoot it? And he's just like, these people like they just don't get it.
Yeah.
They don't get it. It's all about them. He calls them his fall friends.
The fall friends.
And they're just they're always here, just ready to pounce on any opportunity. And they just think it's like directly available to them. And they're almost offended if I say no.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking about that when you mentioned it first earlier, that they might have 50 interruptions a day, and then also how many of those interruptions are positive.
Yeah.
Like oftentimes I'm sure you have to deal with people that can be, pushy and challenging to work with. Like,
yeah.
And there's also the flip side where there's not as much traffic. We're actually in the rural situation in Montana. There's a lot of spots, and just remind, land trust is like nationwide. So we're building in state by state, but in Montana, there's a lot of rural areas, and they actually can't even get hunters to come hunt on their property.
Yep.
And so we've actually been working a little bit on some rural economic planning to help assist with getting hunters to go out to places that people normally wouldn't seek out because there just isn't much information about it.
Interesting.
And so you have like properties like out in the middle of nowhere up northeast Montana where people don't even know that that's an available resource. Now we're creating the connection and providing more rural economic income to those places that normally wouldn't have gotten that.
Right. Mm-hmm. So you're also opening up extra land that's been locked off.
You are, and like that whole idea between private and public is like, well, if no one hunts on the private land, then you might never move that game off private into a public situation. And so that's also a discussion point. But there's also, I think, me included, you always think of private land as being, or an outfitting experience on private land being very expensive, because it usually is.
Yeah.
It could be anywhere between $5,000 and $15,000 for a hunt.
Right.
Which is crazy.
Which is crazy. And then when I first learned about land trust through a friend, I went on there and I saw all these properties available at a very affordable price. And I was like, is this real?
Yeah.
I was like, I can just book a hunt right here for $100 to go hunt elk right there. And I'm like, that can't be real.
Yeah.
And so it just started to change my perspective on, well, actually, maybe private land is affordable.
It doesn't have to be.
And maybe if I don't buy the next new bow or the next new rifle or the next piece of gear, maybe if I buy durable things that are going to last generationally, maybe I can afford, $100 or $500 or $700 for a hunt that's, in a situation where I know I might be the only one there for that time period that I've selected.
Yeah. And what I really like about the idea is just like opening up more land, and maybe even having landowners that didn't consider hunting access on their land before to offer it now. You wouldn't have been able to hunt there in the first place because that landowner was, not about it. But now with like something like land trust, there's a sense of security for them as well. I know that's a big issue for landowners, is the liability of having someone hunt on your land. And so it's not just, it's not really a negative thing in my eyes. I've heard from people now, some people have some concerns with it, like commercializing the land, or the hunting access, I should say. But it sounds like what you guys are trying to achieve here is, I see mostly upsides to it, making the private land hunting cheaper in terms of like, you don't need to pay $10K for a guided hunt. And then also just increasing the number of, or the amount of access and the land available. And then the other thing is that we are seeing a lot of like big investors and richer folks buying land rurally, yeah, German, sorry, in the rural areas, and like just not doing anything with it, and that, like, sometimes when you leave land how it is and you don't let people hunt on there and whatnot, wildlife populations get out of control. It damages the ecosystem, the trees, the plants. It gets to a point where the white-tailed deer or so were populated. They're dying because they're diseased. Like, I know that's a big issue in Wisconsin. So you kind of need people to hunt on land, is my opinion. And that land trust definitely also helps facilitate that with the landowners that, might have not seen value in letting people hunt there before, but now if there's some monetary exchange, they might want to see that happen on their land.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I think landowners are, like I mentioned before, could be on the brink of, bankruptcy or whatever. Yeah. But, if they can't find ways to make recreational income, then they could go to the next highest bidder.
Right.
And it might be an individual or a trust that doesn't see it the same way, and it becomes locked off. So that could be the other option for sure.
Right.
You made a lot of points there. I'm trying to recollect all the points that you make, but yeah, I think
main point being opening up that access, especially on from landowners that might not want hunting on their land before, but with something like land trust, they see value in it.
Yeah. And for land trust, it's not just a hunting company. So, we are providing experiences for camping, for fishing, for going for a hike, or if you just want to camp out for the evening. Like the property is more than just hunting itself. Could be like overland trail stuff if they have a trail system on their land, if it's big enough.
Interesting.
So you can go there and experience the land, or bird watching. You'd be surprised how big bird watching is.
I bet.
Like, it eclipses the hunting market
Really?
by like 10x.
No way.
That's crazy.
It's not even in the same realm. So when you talk about like bird watching opportunities on these conservation private lands that like we got to hunt on this this one land for a turkey hunt, and we got to see a pretty rare owl in the area, and it like actually grabbed a mouse and put it in its mouth, and he was feeding off of it. It's actually the background of my photo. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, that's sweet.
But it's like
so cool.
But it's like, you know, you get to experience like, you know, I've seen so many different rare species in my head of birds, or just like the collective grouping of birds in areas. So it's like there's just like another level of experience that you might not get from a place that's a public area that gets overused. I think we're pretty special in Montana, where when we go to a trailhead, there's not as many vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to a trailhead in Colorado,
oh yeah,
I can't imagine.
It's just another world. Like you pull up and there could be 100 vehicles at the trailhead wanting to do the same experience that you're trying to have. Yeah. So in different areas, I think land trust will be, you know, heavily sought after as a solution to having an experience that you feel like you can get done and be the only ones there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And from a planning perspective, I'm a dad. You know, you have limited time to do things. Like before, when I didn't have kids, I could go out scouting and go look for countless animals and figure out where they are. And by the day, and then by the weekend, and as the weekend got closer and closer, you could figure out, okay, I know that elk is going to be in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm going into most of my elk hunts completely blind. Like maybe I went there at the end of August and had a glassing session and maybe saw elk, or maybe I didn't see anything. But like opening morning, most of the time I'm going into the woods like, I hope they're here.
Yeah.
You know? And so, and think about that from like a hunting vacation mindset, where a lot of these hunters are booking a hunt and they're from this one spot, and they don't have the time to come out and scout. They don't have the resources to do that. Maybe they can only afford just to drive out here because they already paid a certain amount for the tag and to get guided or not guided. So like being able to come out and be like, I know that I'm the only one there for that 4, 5, 6, 7 days, to them is like huge for them, because they're like, okay, now I know that maybe I have a chance to make this work.
Right. Plus it could potentially also lower public land pressure, you know, because
there's a lot of pressure on public land.
Yeah, especially from out-of-staters who are already willing to pay for the opportunity to hunt, for example, or do other experiences in nature. They're probably much more likely to then jump on something like land trust and go on to private land as well.
Yeah, and we think that most people that are booking on land trust, they're not like the you know, the typical outfitter hunter. Like they're usually just looking for just meat.
Yeah.
Like they're not looking for the biggest buck you can find.
Yeah.
A 200-inch deer. You know, like they're not looking for, they're just looking for, you know, something that will fulfill their freezer.
Right.
And so that's probably a more typical customer that we're getting that's coming through.
Well, that's kind of me. Like how I was mentioned way earlier in the podcast. Like I tend to now be at the point where I seek out the easiest ways to get the meat, you know? So there I'd be really appreciative of opportunities like that. Yeah, but I really like how you focused, or how you started with what it actually does for landowners, because especially ranchers and farmers, I think a lot of people don't understand that. Yeah, I mean, these, you know, how a lot of people don't understand that a lot of them are struggling.
Yeah.
And they're, in my eyes, these people are like the most important to our society in many ways, or one of the most important people. I mean, they supply our food. You know, that's something that most people don't even think about when they go shop in the grocery store. And giving them more ways to really reap the benefits of their land, I don't see an issue with that at all.
Is there any sort of protection in place for landowners? Say you go on their property and step into a cattle guard and break your leg.
Yeah, we have insurance through land trust,
Okay.
so like they're protected for that.
Okay.
And they also obviously have their insurance on their property, most likely. So, yeah, or the individuals insured as well. But yeah, we do protect them from that.
Okay.
So yeah, we definitely look at the landowners as being our primary focus. They're our number one customer. Like the better we can be with our landowner, the better we can have relationships with them, listening to them, listening to what they need, how they would like things to be improved. Like that's our focus. And then the customers are kind of secondary to that.
Yep.
So it's about growing supply. It's about making it more efficient and helping them from a recreational income, keep that land and keep them going.
Right.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great way to do it.
And so foraging, is that on there on the list already? Something you could already be doing with land
You could
trust?
probably already be doing it. I mean, if you were to go on a property and say, I want to camp there, but the nice thing about it is that once you're on the platform you book, we have a service where you can actually message back and forth at the landowner's turnaround time. So like they might be working in the field, like especially in the spring, working on calving season, they can come back and see the message and then respond to you. You'd be like, hey, I'm coming there to camp this weekend. I noticed you have a river bottom. Would you be okay with me, looking and going foraging?
Right.
Yeah. And that would be up to the landowner to then make that call for
looking
you.
For morels, oyster mushrooms around this time of the year,
Right.
Yep.
Like think about the opportunity that just opened up for you to go do that.
Right.
And it's, it's funny, like my wife and I will sit and try to plan like our camping spots for the year because it's so cutthroat, right?
It really is.
It's really cutthroat. So you're going through the Forest Service site and you're like they open blocks of weeks at a time as the calendar clicks forward, right? So like if you're not there at midnight and when the clock turns over, you're not going to get those spots because you're just not into it as much. Now imagine that same scenario for land trust where everyone's just like, it's like supply is really low and it's highly stressful. Then you go to land trust and the supply is there and there's no stress. And it actually costs just about the same amount of money. And now the people are going through the federal site are all crammed together on this one site, really specific. And you're all like, it's basically like you're hanging out with your neighbor who's your camper like 30 yards from you. But then you go to a land trust property for the same price. And now you're next to a river and you've got birds flying over your head. Right. Super peaceful. There's no light around you. You can see the stars and you're camping there for $15 a night and you're having an experience. And maybe you bring all your friends. Right. Now they bring all their campers. Now you're having just like camp outs at your favorite spot on this property. And now you're providing income to the landowner as opposed back to the government system.
Yeah.
Like think about like that whole process there. I mean, that's something that's like worth more weight than gold.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From an experience standpoint.
Yeah. I like the idea. And me coming from Germany, like it's always been because we don't have public land, it's always been private land. And hunting wise, at least, it's the way it to make it real quick, the way it works over there is once you have your hunting license for at least 3 years, you're eligible to lease land from a coalition of landowners because it's almost no one with more than an acre of land over there. So coalition of landowners comes together, leases 200 acres to you. Now you as the one leasing that land, it's a minimum contract of 6 years that you have to lease it. And then you have to manage it. You become like the DNR, like the ranger of that land. You set the tags, like you said, how much is harvested, what age. There are seasons that the government provides, but at least how much you take from the population is your choice. And you're responsible for damages that the wildlife populations or that landowners incur from the wildlife populations. So over there, that's something you can't manage by yourself. So you ask other hunters to come help you, So my dad leases land over there and me, my stepbrother and others get the right to hunt on that land from him. But in exchange, we need to be part of the community, like offer something. So to me, expecting always free access is foreign a bit. I'm always like, I know I need to work for it, whether that be through bartering or just helping with land management projects or even monetarily is kind of normal. So yeah, it's cool to think about that. I think you guys are doing some cool stuff and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. For me, I'm a strong advocate for public land. and I really appreciate it. And I also now equally appreciate private land access and what goes into it. The people involved, the process, the equal exchange, the respectful nature of it. I wish we would respect our public lands just as much.
Oh man.
You know what I mean? Like, if it's amazing working in the industry, how many people will show up for a banquet about wildlife and hunting, like the Mule Deer Foundation or RMAF. But as soon as there was like a volunteer day to go do a field day,
nobody's there.
Nobody's there.
Yeah.
It's like 15 people out of a 350 on public land. And so you say that you love your public land. Well, where were you on that volunteer day?
Yeah.
Where were you helping out with giving your time just as much as your dollar? Because it's amazing if you ever been on a committee. And I was on I helped kind of restart the Mule Deer Foundation for the Bridger Bucks chapter in Bozeman. I was on that for 7 years. And it's amazing how even the money only goes so far, because then we're going to Julie Cunningham to ask her at Region 3 office, like, what opportunities are there to improve mule deer habitat in the area? And she's only got a list of a few things. But, you know, with the involvement and being more active, maybe we could create more opportunities and more improvement. So, yeah, I think it's equally important, if you're a public land advocate, to be activating with your time to help improve those situations too. So, yeah, with my mind, I think it's, you know, private and public both have their place, and we should respect the process of both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
I think that's very fair. Yeah.
Well, Ryan, I think we've gone over an hour and a half now. I think.
Oh, we have? Geez, I haven't lost the time. Gotta go eat dinner.
Yeah, pretty good for now. I'm happy with everything we talked about. Is there anything else you want to get out there that you think we didn't ask?
No, I just, it's been fun for me. I've been in that kind of a transitional zone from work to work. And, so I've been spending a little bit more time with Land Trust and been doing a lot of like content creation stuff. Like branding has always been a big thing for me. And it's amazing, like, I've always done a good job of promoting brands, but I've never done a good job of like promoting myself or like what I'm into or what I'm trying to create. So kind of going through that process of kind of discovering, what I want to put out there as far as like a thing. Cause I don't really like being involved in things that don't have any value.
Right.
And so hopefully anything I put out there or any messaging I put out there actually has some value for somebody to either dig into more, because even things I've talked about on this podcast, like, it's not representative of the entire breadth of knowledge behind those things. So I always encourage people to dive deeper into what's being discussed as opposed to just what's being said.
Yes.
Right. Definitely.
I love that.
Because it's only like a snapshot of that. And so I always encourage people to kind of keep diving deeper and researching for themselves and like, coming up with an opinion about something that they've formulated on their own, as opposed to just listening to somebody talk and then being like, oh, that's how it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Follow those rabbit holes.
Right.
Yep.
Follow the rabbit hole. And so so it's producing a lot of different content for a couple of different brands, or for myself, or helping kind of friends get started with some of those things. That's been a big passion of mine. So, if you ever, I'm sure you'll throw some links in there, but just following on Instagram and some other YouTube stuff I've been working on with like more of like an overland hunting type mindset. And we didn't touch about overland hunting or overland in general, but that's been an even bigger passion of mine beyond long range and bow hunting.
Well,
so
we'll have to do another.
Yeah, if you're down, I'd love to do another podcast. There's a lot of things we didn't even get to, but that's just the nature of having good conversation. And I thought this was a super valuable conversation.
Yeah,
I think people are really going to like it. And what is your Instagram and YouTube? So I'll link it. But
yeah, it's just Ryan __ Holm, and then on YouTube it's just Overland Hunting. But yeah, maybe we can go foraging for a little bit.
Let's do it,
and then we can talk about overland hunting, and come back and do another one.
Yeah,
that would be really fun.
I'm always looking for more people to forage with. So.
Sweet,
awesome. Well, Ryan, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Yeah,
let's do it again.
Yeah, thanks.